Welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. No other than Mr. EksAyn Anderson. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. EksAyn, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm a dad, and I decided that I wanted to write a book for my children to let them know what's important before I die. And I just think that the most important thing we can do as in our whole lives really is to make a difference in our own families. And that's just important.
Certainly, Mr. EksAyn Anderson. Thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. So, what are the most important life lessons I want to share with my children?
Well, it's a great question. One of the things I want my children to know is just important how important it is to make a difference in your own family. One of the things that we've done in the world is we've tried to make it like what we do outside the home is so important. But Daniel, I've got to tell you, um, when I'll ask people, do you know what your great great grandfather or your great great grandmother did for a living? So this is your grandparents' grandparents. When I
Yes.
ask this question to people, Daniel, there are so many people who cannot tell you. They might be able to tell you one or two, maybe if they're really good, but you have 16 great great grandparents, 16 of them, and nobody cares if they, if what they did for a living. I mean, they don't care if they had the biggest house in the neighborhood. They don't care if they had a nice horse or a nice plow. But the kind of parent that they are is still profoundly affecting me. It's affecting you. The legacy that our grandparents left, even if we don't realize it, is very, very strong. And so, if we want to focus on building a business that's going to last maybe a decade or two, or we want to focus our energy on being a good dad or a good parent, a good mom, the one that's going to have by far, Daniel, the most lasting effect is being a good parent. And that's why I wrote this book for my children. And that's why I'm starting a movement to inspire dads across the globe to step up and be the very, very best parents that we can be. Our entire civilization depends on it. If families, let me tell you this, Daniel, if families break down, families are the building blocks of our civilization. If they break down, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. We need to have strong families. So thank you for your question, Daniel.
You are most welcome, Mr. EksAyn, and very well said. Beautifully articulated. So, what are the values you hope they live by every day?
Well, this is a great question. And values are before let's talk about the question for just a second here.
Yes.
Values are super important. But in my view, even more important than values are principles. And let me tell you the difference in my estimation, Daniel. Principles are like the actual terrain, like what's actually out there. And values are kind of the map we have in our head of what's out there. So let me give you an example. Gravity is really, really real, right, Daniel? Gravity
Yes.
works. Gravity works here where I'm at. It works where you're at. It works on the other side of the planet. Gravity even works out in space. I mean, it keeps the satellites going around the Earth. It keeps the moon going around the Earth. It keeps the Earth going around the sun. Millions and millions of miles away, there are clusters of galaxies held together by gravity. They're just spinning out there billions of miles away. Gravity's everywhere. And gravity is real whether people value it or not. Now, I ask people sometimes, I'm like, okay, when we come in contact with something real like gravity, we have a couple choices. We can either respect it and align with it, or we can ignore it. And I'll ask people, I'll say, well, how could you align with gravity to say make you money. We'll just say money, even though that's not the most important thing in life by far. And I ask people, and people say this, well, you could build a skydiving company. People could jump out of your plane. You could use gravity. They could have this thrilling experience coming out of a plane. Or you could build a roller coasters, or a bungee jumping company, or build a ski resort, or a hydroelectric dam that uses gravity and it makes millions of dollars selling electricity. So gravity that's bigger than you, it's bigger than me, is just there. And it's real whether you believe it is or not. I can align with it, and I could maybe become wealthy if I really wanted to use gravity to my advantage. Now, on the other hand, if I were to ignore gravity, if I were to be careless with gravity, well, what could happen? Well, I could fall off a cliff. I could be injured. I could even die. So gravity's just there. And I can either align with it and build a ski resort or a hydroelectric dam, or I could ignore it and fall off a cliff. Gravity itself doesn't change. The only thing that changes is whether I align or ignore. Now, gravity, I call a principle because it's real. The principle of gravity, it's a scientific principle. It's there. But what if I really didn't respect gravity? Can you imagine somebody saying, well, gravity might work for you, but it doesn't really work for me? That same person, Daniel, could go to the edge of a cliff and say, I believe I can fly, and jump off. And when they jump off, what takes over? Well, gravity, because it's real, even though they don't think it works for them. So if you value, like there are principles, Daniel, that are just as real as gravity in our relationships, in our families, things like honesty.
Yes.
Like let me give you an example. If you want people to trust you, you've got to be honest, and you've got to walk your talk, and you've got to keep your word. If you don't do those things, you lose trust. Now, people can say, well, I want to have trust and I don't want to have to do those things, and that's what I value. Well, too bad. Your map doesn't line up with reality. And so principles, in my view, are the actual terrain. It's what's really, really real. Values are the map we hold in our head about what we think the terrain is. If our values match up with what's really, really there, then we can go places because we've got a map of what's really real. But if I have a map of New York and I'm trying to get around Miami, it doesn't work because my map's wrong. If my values, which is kind of our map, don't match up with what's really there. If I value being a liar and a cheat and a thief, and I want to build trust with people, my value isn't gonna match up with the real world, which is you got to be honest and keep your word. And so what I want my kids to know is let's find out what's really, really real and try to value what's real. The timeless stuff, like honesty, like integrity, like the golden rule, treat people like you want to be treated. These are as big, they're as real, Daniel, as gravity. And so I want my children to value what's real, not just some fake map that other people is popular at the time. And that's what we need to teach our children. If we're going to change the world, Daniel, and we're
Yes.
going to change the world. And I appreciate you being a platform for this. We need dads who are going to step up and teach their children principles so that they have a map that matches reality. And those principles are ancient, like honesty, integrity, the golden rule, just as real as this principle of gravity we were talking about. That was a long answer, but I felt like I needed to say it. So thank you for asking, Daniel.
Yes, indeed. And another very well said. I'm going to give you a cheering squad for that. A cheering squad, not only a clap. Very well said, Mr. EksAyn.
Thank you, Daniel.
So how can they learn to make wise decisions in life?
Great question. And I think it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about there. First of all, we need to know what's real.
Yes.
And then we need to make our decisions based on what's real, not how we're feeling at the moment. So let me give you one example. Have you ever heard of Stephen Covey?
Yes. Seven
Yes,
Ivy.
he wrote many books, some of them a few decades ago. One of them was called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was a great book. Yes. I believe it was that book, something like this was said. He said that he was giving a presentation. Somebody came up to him after the presentation and said something like this. They said, I don't love my wife anymore. Now, this surprised him. And he kind of looked at the guy and said, well, then love her. And the guy said, you didn't hear me. I've fallen out of love. My wife's fallen out of love with me. We have 3 kids. We're probably going to get a divorce. It's kind of worrying me. And Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said, if you're not feeling it, and by the way, I hope I'm getting the details right. It might not be word for word, but it's this same effect. He said, if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her. And the guy said, well, how do you love somebody that you don't love? I just told you I've fallen out of love. And he said, you know what, my friend? You're acting like love is a feeling. Love is not a feeling. It's an action word. It's a verb. It's something we do. But if we do the verb, the feeling will follow. Did you hear that? This is huge. It's a principle like gravity. We can lead our feelings with our actions. Now, it doesn't happen right away. Sometimes it takes a while. Let me give you an example. That's the same principle. I had a friend named Brody. Brody, he did this thing called the Spartacus workout, and he said, I did it, and I hated it. Daniel, he didn't like it at all. He said, I did it. It was this workout that you have to do. I think it's like an hour long or something, and it's all kinds of muscle confusion. And he did this workout, and when he was done, he goes, I could barely walk. I was so sore. But I'd committed to do the workout. So I did it again the next day, and I still hated it. And I did it again the next day, and I still hated it. And I did it again the next day, and I still hated it. I did it again the next day, and I hated it, and I hated it. He goes, I kept doing it because I'd committed, but I didn't like it. But he goes, but I kept doing it. And he goes, it was really interesting because right around week 2.5 or 3, something changed. He said, I got to the end of the workout, and instead of hating it, he goes, I felt good. And he goes, I felt like I was just getting started. And I wanted to do the workout again. So I did the workout again. And it was awesome. He goes, I did it again the next day. I got to the end of this workout. Instead of hating it, I liked it. You see, Daniel, it took him 2.5 or 3 weeks for his feelings to catch up with his actions. And so what I want my kids to know is do the right thing. Like, do the right thing, even if you don't feel like it. Align with those timeless principles. If you don't feel like being honest, be honest anyway. If you don't feel like treating someone right because you're kind of in a bad mood, treat them right anyway. And as you do that, your feelings begin to follow. You start to feel like doing the right thing. Now, if everybody just makes their decisions on their feelings, I've got bad news for you, Daniel. I mean, our feelings are kind of like the weather. You can do, and they always don't lead us in the right direction. Let's be honest. So yes. If we can try to make our decisions based on principles and do it, whether we feel like it or not, that's a key. So super good question. Thank you for asking, Daniel.
You are most welcome. And gravity is like having faith in God. There is a God over there, just like gravity.
There
Just
is.
believe. Just
Let's
believe
just
it.
be, there is a God. And if people don't believe it, doesn't change it.
Totally. So, what does it mean to live a meaningful and fulfilling life, Mr. EksAyn?
Well, that is a question that everybody gets to answer for themselves. And somehow we know deep inside, if we listen, as you said before, there is a God. And if we're still and listen, we can find out what that is for us, what we need to do. My mission in life might be different than yours, and your mission in life might be different than someone else who's been on the show. And my children have a unique mission. What that is between, frankly, the Creator and ourselves, right?
Yes.
I think I want to teach my children to learn principles so that they can have the good things on their side. Like, think about this for just a second, Daniel. And I'm getting back to your question, but I want to just talk about it. If I'm standing on top of a hydroelectric dam, I don't know if anyone's ever done that, like a huge dam.
Yes.
You can almost sense there's like gazillions of gallons going through this hydroelectric dam, making millions of dollars of electricity. It's using gravity, just doing, helping people, making electricity. They're making money selling it. It's a good thing. Now, contrast that with hanging onto a cliff and you're 800 feet up and you think you're going to fall off. Okay.
Yes.
Both situations involve gravity. One of them has aligned with gravity, where gravity is now working for you. It's making that electricity. The other one is working against you because it might injure you. It might even really harm you, right? So how do we get principles that are powerful like that on our side? And we've got to know what's really, really real to do it. You can say, I don't really believe in gravity. That doesn't change gravity. It doesn't. And so what's real? To live a meaningful life, as you asked, Daniel, I think we've got to take the time to be quiet, to figure it out, to pray if we need to do the things we need to, so that we can find out what we need to do in our lives to have a meaningful life. And so, Daniel, I really, really appreciate the question, and it's a great question.
Thank you so much. So how should you, or how should you they handle both success and failure?
These are thoughtful questions. Thoughtful questions. Um, success and failure. I've heard some people say they're both thieves, and you got to handle them the same, right? Sometimes success makes people proud to the
Yes.
point where they're not humble, or it makes them kind of cocky, a little bit proud. And failure sometimes discourages people. And if you can be the kind of person who says, you know what, we're going to treat those two imposters just the same. There was a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but they said, we're going to treat success and failure as imposters, because what we're going to do is we're going to follow principles, whether we're successful or not. We're going to keep going and doing the right thing.
Certainly. So let's talk about love, family, and relationships. Mr. Accent, what should my children understand about love and relationships?
Thank you for the question, Daniel. When we talk about love, and I want to go back to that story I told with Stephen Covey, I really believe that love is a verb. It's an action word. In our society, too many people have just made it into a feeling. And they've made it into this feeling that just kind of maybe comes by and wafts by, like I'm in love and now I've fallen out of love. And that's not what love is. Love is an action. It's something we do. But if we do the action, the feeling will follow. So let me give you an example. Let's just say, Daniel, that I'm not feeling that much love for my wife. Okay, let's say that I feel like I've fallen out of love. And the truth is, in marriages, people sometimes feel like they've fallen out of love. And then they feel later like they've fallen back in love sometimes. But if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason, as Stephen Covey said, to do something loving for your spouse. Why? Because keeping your commitment to your marriage, to your spouse, frankly, is the right thing to do. That's how we build trust. We build trust when we keep our commitments. So many kids are growing up in homes that have been wrecked by people who make decisions based on their feelings instead of their commitment. So what happens is they say, well, I don't feel it for my spouse, and I must have married the wrong person, and now I'm out of here. And what they don't realize is that momentary decision is going to affect their children. It's going to affect their grandchildren. It's going to affect their great. It's going to affect probably 4 generations down, just because those people decided, I'm not going to keep my commitment. I'm going to go with my feelings. And the truth is that we can lead our feelings, Daniel. We can lead our feelings. And so if I'm not feeling love for my spouse, and maybe instead of divorcing, maybe what I need to go do is go do the dishes for my wife. Maybe I need to go give her a break and send her on vacation. Maybe I need to give her a back rub. Maybe I need to do something to do something kind for my wife, rather than just say, oh, I've fallen out of love and it's all over. And I think if we cannot fix this mental thing, and I'm going to be truthful, Hollywood sells it to us. They sell us this thing that, oh, we've got this feeling of love just kind of out there. We can't control it. If we fall in love with someone, then we do this. The truth is, you can lead your feelings to love. I want my kids to know,
Yes.
I can choose to love, and it's a choice. And by the way, that's what makes love so awesome, because it's like I could choose something else, but I don't. I still choose to love. And that's why love brings real joy. Real love brings real joy. And so you ask these great questions and I give long answers, but I appreciate you asking, Daniel.
No
Thank you.
worries. Go ahead. No worries. And people, be the better person and having this dedication to thick and thin, as you said to the pastor or whatever, the priest. So, Mr. Axon, how can they build and maintain strong family bonds?
How can we maintain family bonds?
Yes, strong family bonds
Do you just say
for the
Trump?
kids. Yes, for the kids.
How
How
can you
can you taught
maintain strong
strong
family
family
bonds for the
bonds?
kids? Yes. Well, exactly. These are super good questions. And the truth is, we have to be able to be strong enough in ourselves to, first of all, keep our word to ourselves. It starts with being able to keep your word to yourself. If you can say, hey, I'm going to do stuff. So if you can tell yourself, I'm going to get up in the morning at 6 a.m. Now, you ask this question, you're like, why are you talking about 6 a.m. and getting up in the morning? Hear me out for a minute. If we can keep commitments to ourselves, and it starts here with me. So if I say, I'm going to get up every morning at 6 a.m., what does that have to do with strong family bonds? Well, let me tell you, when you make and keep commitments to yourself, you are now building the foundation for being able to commit to other people. Most relationship problems, Daniel, stem from a couple things. Number one, they stem from people who are not able to keep commitments to themselves, and so they can't keep commitments to others. And so if I'm going to be the kind of person who can keep a commitment to my wife, I first have to be a person who can keep a commitment to myself. Well, when that alarm rings at 6 a.m. and it's telling me to get out of bed, and I'm thinking, oh, but I feel tired and I really don't want to. Now I have a choice. I have to either align with gravity, kind of, so to speak, or ignore gravity, so to speak. So aligning with gravity would say, I made a commitment to me, even though no one can see this commitment. I have to have the honor inside myself to keep the commitment. Now, once we start making these little commitments, it becomes second nature, Daniel, for us to keep our commitments to others. So when I say, if I can keep my commitment to get up at 6 a.m. and do that consistently, or maybe I can keep my commitment to go to the gym, or maybe I can keep my commitment to eat a certain way, or whatever those commitments are, if I can keep commitments to myself, it then becomes second nature for me to be able to keep commitments to my spouse, to keep commitments to my children, to keep commitments to other people at work, and everything changes. And so one of the things we've got to do is teach people to keep commitments to themselves. And when they do that, they can maintain strong bonds because their bonds are based on commitments, not feelings that kind of go around with the weather. Right?
Totally agree, Mr. EksAyn. So let's talk about personal growth and success. How can they develop confidence and believe in themselves?
Well, let's talk about this. So, dadfluence. I got to tell you, I'm wearing this dadfluence hat today. My
Yes.
mission right now, Daniel, is to inspire dads throughout the world. We need to step up. We need to be the best dads we can be. And
Yes.
one of the things that dads are uniquely qualified in doing is building confidence in their children. And let me tell you what I mean. The way we react to certain situations, oftentimes our kids will take that voice that they hear and keep it in their head. Let me give you an example. If my child falls, like let's say we're walking along in the neighborhood or something, and my child falls down and skins their knee. And as a dad, I freak out and say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe you skinned your knee. Oh my goodness, it's bloody and we got to get a Band-Aid on it. And if we don't do this, you're gonna, and I kind of freak out." Well, here's what happens. They can sense that. And even though I'm not saying it with my words, I'm kind of giving this message that, you know what, you're really fragile and you're breakable, right? That's what I'm saying to my child without really saying it because I freaked out. On the other hand, if they skin their knee and I say something like this, hey, it looks like you skinned your knee, and I've skinned my knee too, and it's going to hurt for a bit, but you're going to be okay. This is going to be just fine. And they can hear that calmness in my voice, and they hear that it's going to be just fine. Well, when they are alone later on and they skin their knee and I'm not there, they'll either hear the freak out and they'll start to freak out, or they'll hear the calm. And if I'm calm, they'll say, this is no big deal. I skinned my knee and my dad told me I'll be okay and I'm going to be okay. And we need to have that ability to, when we sense a situation, to go into it. The other thing is we need to believe in our children. And, I've got to tell you, my kids I'll tell you this. I had a daughter who was wanting to hike a mountain. I live in the Rocky Mountains and there's a mountain that's 11,700 feet tall near where I live. And I like to hike this mountain sometimes. And my daughter at 5 years old came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to hike this mountain with you." By the way, she's 5 years old, right? And this mountain is 11,700 feet. You got to hike up thousands of miles. It's about thousands of feet. It's about a 15-mile hike. And at first I could have said, "You know what? You can't do it. You're too young." But instead I asked her, I said, "Are you sure you really want to do it?" And she said, "Dad, I am." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen when we start hiking and your feet start hurting?" She goes, "Well, I'll probably just take a rest and wait till they stop for a little bit and we can keep going." I said, "Are you sure? You really want to do this?" And she goes, "I really want to do it." And I said, "Let's give it a shot." So we got up on this mountain, we started hiking. And I got to tell you, Daniel, my daughter made it to the top of the mountain at 5 years old. There were people who were going up there high-fiving, but it wasn't really about getting to the top of the mountain. When she got up there, there were some people who stood up and gave her a standing ovation. But when she got down, she had this sense of confidence that I can do hard things. And yeah, her feet did hurt. I mean, she even had, I mean, it wasn't easy for her. But as a dad, to give her that experience where, hey, you can say, hey, you know what, you can do hard things, and let her experience it and then overcome it. That's where they're like, you know what, my dad believed in me. And then when other things happen in life, and maybe we're not around, the truth is, Daniel, at some point, we as dads are not going to be around for our kids. We're probably not going to, they're going to live longer than we are.
Yes.
But we want our children to be confident. We want them to know that they can do hard things so that when we're not there, they're doing awesome. And that's the job of a good dad. And I got to tell you, Daniel, I am calling dads all over the world. Whoever can hear this podcast, join us. Teach your kids principles. Become the man you need to be. Start keeping commitments to yourself. Let's learn. Reach out to me. Like, let's find a way to make families great again. Because if we don't, Daniel, our entire civilization will crumble. I don't care who's in office. It doesn't matter if it's this political party or that political party. People think some politician is going to save us. What we really need is good, rock solid families. And right now there's a desperate need for awesome, good fathers out there. And they're out there. And I'm calling to them right now. Join us. Join our movement.
Connect with us.
That's right. Connect.
So, Mr. EksAyn, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
Whatever I need to do to inspire dads to join our movement. And I haven't figured that out. So, I mean, I've got another book coming. It's called Hidden Forces. It's about how influence is found where it's least expected. And let me tell you the premise of the book. Sometimes people think a politician is going to save us. They think people kind of high up, the CEO or the politician. The truth is, Daniel, if you look through history,
yes,
the power lies where it's least expected. I'm going to say right now, parents are the most powerful people on earth. They are shaping generations. And that's what I want my children to know. That's what I want fathers to know. What you do in your home is much more powerful than anything you do at work. It's going to last way longer. I've seen, I've sometimes interacted with political leaders. It's really the people who work for the political leaders who get all the stuff down. They're the ones who have more power than you could think. You wouldn't believe how many, I could tell you stories about how secretaries have more power than the CEO. Even look at history, great men like Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, this is a guy who he was humble. He shamed the entire British Empire out of India. He had more real power than the entire British government. People like Jesus Christ, who he wasn't the big shot at the time. Herod was. But does anybody celebrate Herod's birthday or Caesar's birthday? Nobody does. But they celebrate Jesus' birthday. The power lies where it's least expected. And I want parents to know that our civilization, our nation, our entire civilization depends on good dads stepping up and teaching our children principles. Join us.
Yes. Good luck to your goals, Mr. EksAyn. So let's talk about health, well-being, and happiness for children. What are the keys to living a healthy and balanced life?
A healthy and balanced life. What are the keys?
Yes.
Well, we've talked about it a little bit. If I value something that's not real, it's like having a map of Vancouver when I'm in, say, Dallas, Texas, or having a map of Dallas, Texas when I'm in Vancouver. It doesn't work. So to have a happy, balanced life, what I've got to do first is be humble enough to realize that I'm not a principle unto myself. I do not set the rules. I don't create gravity. There are things bigger than me. Number two, figure out what those principles are. So be humble enough to realize you don't make the rules. Number two, figure out what the rules really are. Figure out what the principles that govern your relationships are, that are as real as gravity. What are they that govern your marriage, your family, your employer, whatever it is? Figure out those principles that are real. And then make your little tiny daily decisions align with those principles. And when you do, it's like building a hydroelectric dam. And when you don't, it's like falling off a cliff. They both use gravity. One's better.
Definitely, again, another empowering answer, Mr. EksAyn. Very well said. So, how can they develop emotional strength and resilience?
Well, I think it's what we talked about. Emotional strength comes from doing hard things. Think about how you get strong in the gym.
Yes.
You get strong in the gym because you do hard things on purpose. So you might run on a treadmill and you're getting tired. So you run for 30 minutes, or you run around the track, you run around the neighborhood, and you're tired and you're sweating. But a day or two later, your body's now stronger because you did something hard. When you're lifting weights, you have to literally lift and lift until your muscles tear. And that's what happens when you lift a weight. You lift a weight, and at some point, you're so tired and your muscle's so sore that it actually tears the little muscle fibers. And then you take a day or two off, and those muscle fibers build back stronger. Now, if we want to have emotional resilience, what we've got to be able to do is align with principles even when it's hard. It's like lifting weights spiritually, lifting weights mentally. I make a commitment to myself to get up at 6 a.m. and I really want to sleep in. I get up and do it anyway. If I make a commitment to do something with my child, I keep my commitment, even if I have to tell somebody else no, because I'm going to keep that commitment to my child. If I make a commitment to my spouse, that I'm going to stay with them forever, even through thick and thin. When things get hard, and they do in every marriage at some point, I'm going to keep my commitment. I'm going to lead my feelings. I'm going to keep that bond, not because I feel like it every moment, but because it's the right thing to do. And when I do that, people become strong. Dads become strong. Parents become strong. Moms become strong. And that's what we need. We need people who can make and keep commitments to themselves and to others. And when they do that, it's hard, but they're building emotional, mental resilience to be great and do great things in their families and in the world.
Yes. Parents be role model to our kids. So, what habits will help them maintain happiness and inner peace?
Habits of inner peace, there's a lot, but they come down to doing the right thing. The truth is, one of the biggest things that causes people not to be peaceful is when they go against their conscience. Now, here's the thing. I believe everybody's got a conscience. Everyone, it doesn't matter where you're from. People know deep down what's right or wrong. It doesn't matter which continent you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter what culture you come from. People have this innate sense of what's right and what's wrong. That they really do. And when we go against our conscience, Daniel, we are at war with ourselves. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Because our conscience is bigger than us. When we go against what we know is right, and we can feel it, we're at war with ourselves. Now, what a lot of people do is, instead of fixing themselves, or some people call it repenting, some people say, hey, I got to fix this problem. Instead of fixing yourself, a lot of people, they take that war out on others, and that causes even less peace. So when we're talking about being at peace, first of all, we've got to follow our conscience. We've got to do the right thing. If we do the right thing, we're not at war with ourselves. To the extent we don't do the right thing, we are at war with ourselves. And the natural thing is to take that war and put it on others and say, well, it's her fault, or it's his fault, or it's my boss's fault, or it's my child's fault, or it's somebody else's fault out there. And that's what we're seeing right now. If you look around, people are blaming everybody. What people really need to do is say, hey, I've got some of these issues myself. I really need to work hard on me. And when we do that, we stop that war outside ourselves. And that helps us be peaceful in our world. And it helps us be peaceful in our families. It helps us be peaceful in our marriages and our communities. The answer is to work on you. And the wise ones through the ages have known this.
Totally agree, Mr. EksAyn. So, how can they manage stress and difficult emotions?
Managing stress and difficult emotions. We've got a few things that we could talk about it. First of all, we got to realize that our emotions. Let me tell you something. I studied psychology in school, Daniel, and there was a renowned marriage counselor who I met at the school I went to, and we had lengthy discussions over time. I asked this counselor. I said, if there was one thing that you could tell people that would help marriages? So he was a marriage counselor, right? So if there was one thing you could tell people that would help marriages, what would it be? And he said something that surprised me. This is what he said. He said, if people would just learn that they are responsible for their own emotions. In other words, the other person's not causing your emotion. I want you to think about this.
Yes.
So when I say she makes me mad, that's a lie. The truth is, the story I'm telling myself about the situation is making me mad. Let me give you an example. I'll bring up Stephen Covey because I love Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey, in one of his books, he walks into this. He's on a train on, I think it was a Sunday morning, and it's a peaceful ride. Everybody's calm, and in walks this guy with his kids onto the train, and he sits down, and the kids are starting to be disruptive. They're bugging people and bumping into people and just making a ruckus. And Stephen Covey starts to feel irritated. He starts to say, he just gets bugged at this guy. And eventually he goes up to the guy because he said, hey, can you please control your kids a little bit more? They're bugging everybody. And then the guy looks at him and says, you know what, I'm so sorry. I got to tell you, their mom just passed away, and I just haven't known how to handle it. And Stephen Covey's feelings went from one of being irritated to one of compassion. Now, why? It's because his thoughts weren't in reality. His thoughts were thinking, this guy's a bad dad. He should control his kids, and he's not. And why he should. And really, he didn't understand what had happened. And if that's and that this is the truth, Daniel, with everyone you see, a lot of times we don't understand what's really going on with someone, and we choose to feel an emotion against them that's negative. But we have to be able to say, my feelings are 100% under my control. They're my feelings. I can choose to be mad at you, or I can choose to be forgiving. I can choose to give you the benefit of the doubt, or I can choose to be super mad. I mean, anything I choose is up to me. And if we could really get that we can choose our own emotions. Now, that's the beginning of wisdom, to be able to say, you know what, it's not her, it's not him, it's not somebody outside of me. In fact, Stephen Covey said, if you think that the problem is out there, that very thought in itself is the problem. You hear that? If we think that the problem is out there, that very thought is the problem. Any problem that we have, if we can, and we could go down this road a little further. I'm not sure how much time we've got, but we could go down this further. The answer is to change ourselves.
Definitely. So, Mr. EksAyn, before we wrap up our discussion for tonight, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, People, fifth season, with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen, Food 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. EksAyn, what is the most important thing I want them to remember about you?
I want people to remember that no matter the question, love is the answer. If you've got problems in your relationship, you can choose to love. If you've got problems with your children, you can choose to love. If you're not feeling love for your spouse or your child, you can choose otherwise. And no matter the question, love is the answer.
Definitely. Mr. EksAyn Anderson, thank you so much for empowering the world, most especially all the dad out there. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, I'd love it if you support our books. Let me tell you this. I'm also, for your listeners, if they're okay with this, if you're okay, they go to dadfluence.org. Have a system that I'll give away for free for your listeners. And it normally sells for about $78, $77. If they put in the word family at dadfluence.org, you can get it for free. Come and join our movement. This is not about making money. This is about changing the world, and we need you. So learn. You can buy my books. I don't need you to buy my books. What I need you to do is I need you to join our movement to help dads and to save our civilization. And I'm so grateful to you, Daniel, for having me as a guest on the show. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Mr. EksAyn, and you are welcome to come back if you have a new book of if you have something to talk about on Book 101 review. So people, let's support Mr. EksAyn because if you support him more and more and more empowering books like this, more empowering speech like this to come. So Mr. EksAyn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. You're a wonderful host. You're doing great things in the world. Thank you for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.